A nomadic hunter-gatherer from the Hadza tribe in Tanzania will have a very different microbiome from someone in New York City. But it's still possible to assess those vastly different microbiomes and determine whether they're healthy or not. I'm Dr. Robynne Chutkan, gastroenterologist, microbiome expert, and author, and I am here to help you find gut bliss. On today's show, I want to tell you about the largest study ever done on the human microbiome. The study was published in 2018 by the American Gut Project, a group of researchers at UC San Diego School of Medicine. And the goal of the study was to better understand the composition and function of the human microbiome, what types of bacteria are involved, how many, and the impact of diet, lifestyle, and disease. The study included microbial data from more than 11,000 people around the world, representing 45 different countries. This project and the important results that it yielded is an example of citizen science at its best. It's everyday people helping to address real-world problems by collecting and contributing their own data. In the words of Rob Knight, one of the co-founders of the American Gut Project, "It's really amazing that more than 10,000 people, members of the public who want to get involved in science, whether or not they work in a lab or have a PhD, have mailed their poop to our lab so that we can find out what makes a difference in somebody's microbiome." So what does make a difference in somebody's microbiome? Before I answer that question, I want to give you a definition of what the microbiome is, just in case there's anyone who may be a little less familiar with the science who's listening. The microbiome refers to all the organisms that live in or on your body. All of the bacteria, viruses, fungal organisms, protozoa, helminths, those are worms for those of us who have them, as well as all of their genes. You are host to more than 100 trillion microbes. That includes thousands of different species. In fact, you have more than 1 billion bacteria just in one drop of fluid in your colon alone. Your unique microbial footprint develops over your entire lifetime, and it reflects everything about you. Your parents' health, how and where you were born, what you've eaten, including whether you were breastfed or not, where you've lived, your occupation, your personal hygiene, past infections, exposure to chemicals and toxins, medications, hormone levels, and even your emotions. Things like stress can have a profound impact on your microbiome. The end result of all of this is a microbial mix that is so distinctive between different people that it is a more accurate identifier of you than your own DNA. Trying to answer the question, what does a healthy microbiome look like, is sort of like asking, what does a healthy person look like? The answer is healthy people come in lots of different forms and shapes and sizes. There is no one height or weight or race or set of genes that defines good health. But despite this variety, we still have some consensus on what general good health looks like. And I like the World Health Organization definition. They define health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And I like this more holistic definition because it includes not only physical well-being, but also mental and social aspects. And it acknowledges that health is dynamic and changing, but also involves balance and equilibrium. And probably most importantly, it's a definition that goes beyond lab data and metrics to emphasize that good health also means that you're functioning optimally and that you're, living a fulfilling life. So knowing what we know about this definition of health from the World Health Organization, what can we say about a healthy microbiome? What does that look like? When we come back. The Gut Bliss podcast is brought to you by VisBiome, my first and quite frankly, my only choice for a probiotic. Whether you're dealing with irritable bowel syndrome or just looking to restore your gut health, Visbiome can help. It's a medical food for the dietary management of IBS and gut inflammation, backed by science and clinically vetted by thousands of my own patients. Find your gut bliss with Visbiome. Go to visbiome.com/gutbliss and use discount code GUTBLISS at checkout. A member of the Hadza tribe, nomadic hunter-gatherers living in Tanzania, will have a microbiome that is adapted for their unique environment. And that microbiome is going to look very different from somebody who is living in New York City. But it's still possible to assess those vastly different microbiomes and say that both our Tanzanian brother and our New York sister are microbially healthy, or not. And that's because even without having identified all the thousands and maybe even hundreds of thousands of species that live in our bodies, and also allowing for the dynamic nature of a community that is alive and changing all the time, even allowing for these things, we know what the features of a healthy microbiome are. We know that just like with overall health, a healthy microbiome does not just involve the absence of disease-causing microbes. It also involves the presence of healthy, health-promoting species and some other really important features like diversity. A healthy microbiome has a high level of bacterial diversity, meaning it contains many different species. And this diversity is really important for digestion and for absorption of nutrients and for your immune system to function properly. We know that a healthy microbiome has resilience. It is resistant to disruption from things like antibiotics or viral illnesses, and it can recover to a healthy state after it has been stressed. We know that production of metabolic byproducts that are associated with critical bodily functions, byproducts like short-chain fatty acids, are also a marker of a healthy microbiome. These products are sometimes referred to as postbiotics, and the presence of these chemical compounds that the bacteria are making can sometimes be even more important than the bacteria themselves. For example, we know that high levels of short-chain fatty acids are associated with better outcomes after COVID infection. Okay, when we come back, no more beating around the bush. I am going to tell you the results from the American Gut Project study that identified the biggest influence on the health of your microbiome when we come back. What did this global study of over 10,000 people from more than 40 different countries around the world tell us about what a healthy microbiome looks like? Keeping in mind the framework I just went over of diversity, resilience, presence of healthy species, and metabolic byproducts. What it told us is something that hundreds, if not thousands, of other studies had also concluded, which is that the most important determinant of a healthy microbiome is your diet, and specifically the number of different plants in your diet. Why? Because eating a high diversity of plants leads to a high diversity of microbes, and diversity is critical for a healthy microbiome. The study found that participants who ate more than 30 different plant foods per week had gut microbiomes that were more diverse than those who ate 10 or fewer types of plants per week. And the gut samples of these two groups also differed in the types of molecules present, with higher levels of important postbiotics like the short-chain fatty acids I just mentioned in people who ate lots of plants. And the really interesting thing about this study is that it didn't matter how those people identified, whether they were vegetarian or vegan or pescatarian. There were vegans who were eating fewer than 10 plants per week, and there were omnivores who were eating way more than 30. So it's not about whether you eat meat or not, or the label that you attach to your diet. It's about how good you are at eating plants. And I see this in my patient population all the time. I see vegans who are eating lots of ultra-processed fake meat and pasta and literally no actual vegetables. And I see omnivores, or even people on relatively low-carb diets who are eating tons of vegetables along with their animal protein. I have many wonderful friends and colleagues in the plant-based community, incredible people like Dr. Neil Bernard of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who has contributed so much to the science. And there are many, many reasons to not eat animals, including ethical concerns about how these animals are treated, as well as the safety of the meat supply that we are eating. But what I have found in my 30 years of gastroenterology practice is that the most important thing to do if you are trying to improve the health of your gut is to eat more plants. And that is exactly what the results of the American Gut Project study showed. People who were eating 30 or more different plant foods per week had a more diverse and really a healthier microbiome than those who were eating fewer than 10 plant foods per week. And in my practice, we are able to get patients with serious autoimmune diseases off of immunosuppressive medications by primarily getting them to eat more plants. And that is the case even if they are still eating some animal protein. So it's less about removing things, and it's more about adding in that wide variety of different plant foods that is going to make you and your microbes healthier. Not surprisingly, the study found that antibiotics had a major negative impact on the microbiome, and that eating a lot of plants also protected you from something called antibiotic resistance, which is when you're taking an antibiotic to kill off bad bacteria, but the antibiotic isn't working. And that's probably because people who eat fewer plants are eating more meat from antibiotic-treated animals or processed foods where antibiotics are added as a preservative. Yes, that is what is going on in our food industry. And those things are going to favor the survival of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The study also had some interesting additional findings. They found that people with mental disorders like depression, schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, those folks tended to have microbiomes that were more similar in composition to each other compared to mentally healthy people. And they also found some specific bacteria may be more common in people with depression. And if you want to learn more about that, check out episode 25 of the Gutless podcast, The Future of Probiotics. So what are some of the other factors besides things like diet and antibiotics that can impact your microbiome? Exercise is a big one. We know that athletes typically have higher levels of microbial diversity. And there was a famous study done in the UK where they looked at rugby players, and they found that rugby players had these microbiomes that were much more diverse and sort of richer in a lot of the important species. We know that medications are another one, and this time contribute negatively. So medications can cause instability and imbalance in the microbiome. Obviously, things like antibiotics, but also acid-blocking drugs like proton pump inhibitors, steroids, some immunosuppressive drugs. There's a long list. Aging is another one, and unfortunately, unlike diet and exercise and medications, we can't do much about the fact that we're aging. In fact, we should celebrate that because the alternative is not aging, which means that you're not alive. We know that the microbiome changes throughout a person's life as a result of aging. Your immune system becomes less active, and other factors can really affect the microbiome. But the good news here is that we have growing evidence that a more diverse microbiome reduces frailty and can actually slow down aging. And if you want to learn more about that, check out the December edition of the Gutless blog for some science and an article on frailty and aging in the microbiome. In fact, if you want to dive deeper into the specific factors that influence your microbiome and what to do about them, go back to episodes 26 and 27 of the podcast on SIBO and dysbiosis. The most common question that people usually have when they hear about this 30 different plant foods per week number is, what does 30 plant foods in a week look like? I want to remind you that the definition of a plant food is not just fruits and vegetables. It's also whole grains and nuts and seeds and beans and other legumes and herbs and spices. And if 30 plants in a week sounds like a lot, let's think about what you can do with one bowl of oatmeal in the morning. You have your oats, and then maybe you add some chopped walnuts, some blueberries, raisins, pumpkin seeds. I like to put a little shaved coconut on top and some cinnamon. So we are already up to 7 different plants with that one bowl of oatmeal. When I'm making a rice bowl, I usually start with brown rice, and then I'll add some chopped cabbage and celery and broccolini, as well as sautéed onion, garlic, and leeks, and typically some sort of legume like lentils. So that's 8 plants in a simple rice bowl. And of course, you're welcome to add some animal protein to that also, if that is your preference. But between the oatmeal and the rice bowl, we are at 15 different plants, which is more than half your goal for the week of different plants you should be eating. And that's just with 2 meals in one day. The key here is variety. Do not get stuck in that rut of peas, carrots, and broccoli in heavy rotation every day. And a big thing to help is to shop at the farmer's market, because you end up eating based on what's available throughout the different growing cycles of the year. And it encourages you to try different things like dandelion greens or rutabaga that you would not normally purchase at the supermarket, because at the supermarket, you're just buying the same things every week that are always available. The other critical thing is to make these plants as unprocessed as possible. You're not going to get credit for potato chips because those are generally an ultra-processed food. Same for a fruit roll-up versus an actual piece of fruit. So try and eat the plant in its least processed form because that's where you're going to get the most benefit. The data from the American Gut Project study is really important, but it's also important to keep in mind that this is an academic research study. This is not a diagnostic test. Participants are not getting their microbiomes tested for anything, and the results are not providing medical advice. The goal of the project is to advance microbiome research so that we can apply it to improve human health. But what to do for your health should always be a personal decision based on your unique history. So I want to leave you with 3 takeaways about your microbiome. Number 1, the number of different plants in your diet is the most important factor in terms of influencing the health of your microbiome. Aim for 30 different plant foods per week. Number 2, don't stress too much about what else is on your plate. Yes, ultra-processed foods should be absent or no more than 10% of what you're consuming, but don't get sidetracked trying to make that perfect. Focus on getting in those 30 plants every week and see what happens. Number 3, a common sense approach based on things that you do not need a scientific study to tell you, like eating a healthy diet, judicious use of medications, making sure you're getting out in nature, managing stress, staying hydrated, moving your body. Those things will make a huge difference for your health and the health of your microbiome. So that's it for this edition of the Gutless Podcast on creating a healthy microbiome. Coming up next week, the top 3 things you need to know if you are experiencing acid reflux. Go to gutbliss.com for my free 7-day microbiome reboot course. If you like what you're hearing, drop a review and hit that subscribe button. And remember, dirt, sweat, vegetables, the best prescription for a healthy gut.
The information presented in this show is not meant to be medical advice. Consult your doctor before making any decisions about your health. The patients discussed are real people, but names and identifying features have been changed to protect their privacy.